This is the RSD Wildcat, a 125mm trail bike that's versatile to the core. Literally. The frame features sliding dropouts that allow you to adjust the chainstay length by up to 15mm. And this type of geometry adjustment isn't unique to RSD. Lots of modern mountain bikes come with some kind of flip chip or some sort of geometry adjustment that allows you to run either a 29-inch wheel front and back, 27.5-inch wheel front and back, or a mullet or mixed wheel setup where you have a 29-inch wheel in the front and a 27.5-inch wheel in the back. And all that hype's got us asking why? What difference can wheel size actually make? Well, spoiler alert, lots. And in this video, we're gonna be putting that to the test. But before we do that, I think a brief history lesson is in store. Because it wasn't long ago that debating the merits of different wheel sizes wasn't even a question. And that's because there was only one. When mountain bikes first hit the scene in the late 70s, they all came with what was then and arguably still is the most prevalent and readily available wheel size, and that's 26-inch. And these wheels worked great for the time. Their relatively small size matched the nimble handling characteristic of those early bikes. And since outright speed was much more limited by other components like brakes, tires, and suspension, or lack thereof, no one seemed to notice the limited potential 26-inch wheels offered the average mountain biker. But by that time, road cyclists had been using bigger wheels for years. And as you can imagine, it didn't take long for a few rogue cyclists to start trying these bigger road bike wheels on their mountain bike. And in 2004, Gary Fisher became the first major manufacturer to release a 700C, better known in the mountain bike world as a 29-inch mountain bike. But it wasn't an overnight success, and it took about another decade for frame and fork geometry to catch up with this new standard and make 29-inch wheels prevalent. Along the way, another wheel size got introduced to road biking, and that is 650B, or better known as 27.5-inch. Fast forward to today, and 26-inch wheels are pretty much only found on youth bikes and dirt jumpers. And while 27.5-inch wheels did enjoy a short time in the spotlight, it seems like the industry is shifting more and more to making 29-inch wheels the standard on all mountain bikes. But this is where things start to get a little tricky, because as you'd probably guess, there's quite a few objective and subjective pros and cons to both 29 and 27.5-inch wheels. And while the industry may have chosen 29ers as their go-to, lots of riders, myself included, still prefer the handling characteristics of a smaller 27.5-inch wheel. Now add to that the recent surge of bikes that come with a 29-inch wheel up front and a 27.5 in the back, and it can get straight up confusing. But what and I'm guessing you want to know is, how do those three options affect the typical day-to-day trail riding we often do? And to find out, I'm going to take each one on a 4-mile test loop that consists of chunky black diamond tech, fast-flowing greens, and everything in between. To keep things fair and consistent, each wheel size will be using the same tires, 2.6-inch Schwalbe Hans Dahms. The only thing that will change during testing is the fork. I'll be substituting my 29-inch DVO Diamond D2 for a RockShox Lyric Select when I test the pair of 27.5-inch wheels. But that's enough talking, let's get on the trail and start riding. First up is 29-inch wheels, which, like I said earlier, are the most common, accounting for about 70% of new mountain bikes sold. These larger wheels excel at carrying momentum through flowy and technical terrain alike. This is due in large part to their small attack angle, or in other words, how far up a particular object makes contact with the wheel. I noticed this most when climbing sections of straight, chunky trail. The big wheels had no problem rolling over square edge rocks. And this setup was equally forgiving on the descents. The big wheels handled my poor line choices with ease. Another commonly stated benefit of 29-inch wheels that I didn't necessarily notice on this ride is the increased stability that actually comes from the frame design. To compensate for the larger diameter wheels, frame designers will lower the bottom bracket, resulting in a more stable ride feel. I may have noticed this if I spent more time on faster descents, but I actually preferred the descending characteristics of the smaller wheels. But I'll talk more about that later. Moving on to the cons, and the first and arguably biggest is their added weight. The 29-inch setup weighed nearly 2 pounds or 1 kilogram more than the 27.5-inch wheels. And this isn't just any weight, it's rotating weight, which is much more noticeable while riding. Many people claim that the added weight can make 29ers feel sluggish when accelerating. And while I didn't notice this right off the bat, I will say that the smaller 27.5-inch wheel setup did feel noticeably zippier and more responsive when climbing non-technical terrain. One final con I want to bring up that doesn't necessarily apply to me, but smaller riders can sometimes have issues rubbing their rear tire when descending with their weight over the back of the wheel. So if you're under about 5'5", be sure to test this out before buying a 29-inch bike. Overall, a 29-inch wheel is the best choice for riders who prioritize speed and control over maneuverability and playfulness. And if you live in an area with lots of technical rocks and roots, a 29er is almost certainly for you. Next up, it was time to switch to a mullet setup. This was a pretty easy change on my RSD Wildcat. All I had to do was exchange my 29-inch rear wheel for a 27.5 and adjust the dropouts to their shortest setting of 425 millimeters. RSD claims that this mixed wheel setup with a 140mm fork puts the bottom bracket height at 345mm, just 5mm less than the full 29-inch setup. This meant that I didn't have any pedal clearance issues, but I did find myself hanging up a bit more in the slow rocky sections. My front tire would still roll over just fine, but I definitely had to work a bit harder to muscle the rest of the bike through. Otherwise, it would almost feel like someone reaching out and grabbing my rear tire when it would hit a bigger step while climbing. But this wasn't an issue at all while descending, and I enjoyed how much more easily I could lift the front end when rolling off big drops, even at slow speeds. And this added playfulness is one of the biggest reasons why riders will forsake the added speed and stability of a 29-inch wheel for a smaller one. And many believe that a mullet setup gives you the best of both worlds. Business in the front for the big chunky rocks, but a party in the back, manualing, pumping, and jumping with ease. So if you like riding a bit of everything and you want your bike to excel in the biggest variety of terrain, or maybe you're a shorter rider who wants the benefit of a 29-inch setup without needing to dodge the rear tire, then a mullet or mixed wheel setup is for you. Last up was testing a pair of 27.5-inch wheels, and for this I had to change my fork, swapping the 29-inch 140mm DVO Diamond D2 for a 27.5-inch RockShox Lyric Select with the same amount of travel. This bike was the lightest of all three setups, weighing 33.1 pounds, about 2 pounds less than the full 29-inch version. Now, it had been a while since I rode a full 27.5-inch bike, but I was immediately reminded just how fun they are to corner. The short wheelbase and smaller, stiffer wheels are a blast to rail around berms, and the decreased rotating weight made pedaling out of tighter sections of trail extra rewarding. And surprisingly, I didn't even mind the rocks. I felt like the smaller, more agile wheels held their own just fine, albeit maybe just a bit more slowly. That is until those rocks were on the uphill. The 27.5-inch wheels dropped my bottom bracket by 20 millimeters, all the way down to just 330 millimeters off the ground, making pedal strikes all but unavoidable.
Holy, pedal strikes and losing traction.
This, combined with the tendency for the smaller wheels to get caught up on bigger ledges, meant that I was doing a lot of walking. And to be honest, that didn't necessarily surprise me. I knew that technical climbing would not be a strength of the 27.5-inch wheels. But speaking of strength, one last thing I should mention is that I obviously didn't test these wheel sizes on any jump trails. But based on previous experience, I'm pretty confident that these smaller wheels would have been the clear winner there. The smaller circumference and shorter wheelbase makes it harder to get bucked off the lip and easier to add some style once you're in the air. So while they might not excel in the chunk, if you're local trails or on the flowier side, or you spend a lot of time at the pump track or dirt jumps, then a 27.5-inch bike is probably the way to go. So there you have it, 3 distinct wheel sizes ridden and tested, and each of them do represent their own separate pros and cons. But what I want to know is which one you're going to choose for your bike. And you can let me know down there in the comments whether you appreciate the playfulness of 27.5, the speed of a 29, or maybe you're going to ride the fence like me and choose a mullet. While you're down there, if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and hit that thumbs up button to like this video, subscribe to the 99 Spokes channel, and lastly, remember that bikes are for everybody. Have fun out there.